Hi, I'm Dina Stepanek.
And I'm Caitlin Cooper.
We're here to give you a crash course or an overview in rehabilitation Pilates based on the Stott Pilates method.
So, Joseph Pilates was the founder of the Pilates method. He used methods from yoga, gymnastics, boxing, meditation to help rehabilitate soldiers actually after World War II. He had been working in a convalescent hospital in England, where he was in an internment camp there, and realized that the people who were able to exercise recovered their health a lot quicker. So he developed some methods of exercise for some of those people who were forced to be on bed rest to incorporate exercise back into their wellness program. He eventually took all of his concepts and opened his own studio in New York City called Joe's Place, and that was the beginning of the Pilates movement of exercise.
So Caitlin and I have both had training in the rehabilitation Stott Pilates method, and there's Stott Pilates is a version of Pilates that is a branch off of the original method, and it incorporates current research from physical therapists and fitness specialists to give a more comprehensive approach and assessment of movement. And we're both drawn to the rehab method of Stott Pilates because as physical therapists we are often dealing with the rehab population, and so it fits very nicely in with the same ideas and principles that we use in rehabilitating our patients. And it helps us achieve the same goals, and those goals are awareness of our bodies, strength and coordination, all in an effort to achieve pain-free, efficient movement.
So one of the biggest factors in Pilates exercise and in the Pilates rehabilitation exercise is the use of the core. So in exercise and physical fitness realms, the core is often inaccurately labeled as the abdominal muscles. So you're doing crunches and sit-ups to try to tighten your core. And those exercises actually affect mostly some muscles that move you, and we're looking for stability in muscles that are really deep and strengthening their deep. So the core really is this three-dimensional flexible cage inside of your body, and when we do access your abdominal muscles, they're really deep ones. So you have 4 layers of abdominal muscles. You have your rectus abdominis that goes from top to bottom, from your rib cage to your pubic bone, and that moves you this way. And then you have 2 layers of oblique muscles. They crisscross on your sides here, and they help you to rotate and to bend and to stabilize you to some extent. But deep underneath that, you have a muscle that comes from your hip bones here. It comes up sort of to your belly button, rib height, and the connective tissue of that muscle actually wraps around to the spine, the only abdominal muscle that actually wraps around to the spine. And when those fibers that are horizontal contract, they pull in like a corset. So just like if you were wearing a back brace, it gives you that support. That transverse abdominis gives you that support in the front. That's the front layer. In the back, you have little muscles along your spine, your transverse abdominis. Not your transverse abdominis, your multifidus. Those are tiny muscles that crisscross along the joints in your spine, and they give you that front and back support. And then on top, you have your diaphragm. It's the muscle that helps you to breathe, expanding your ribs. And so each time that muscle contracts, it pulls down, kind of vacuum pressure onto your ribs, and your ribs expand, and your lungs expand. And then underneath is your pelvic floor. And so that sits inside of your pelvic bowl, and it gives you that cage on top, bottom, and front and back.
So our bodies are always working in 2 modes simultaneously. One of those is movement or mobility, and the other is stability or some grounding force behind that movement. An example of how those 2 work simultaneously would be looking at a baseball pitcher and how he uses the excessive motion at his shoulder to be able to cock up for a pitch, but then he uses the stability of his core to be able to throw the ball accurately across the plate time after time after time. So you have that combined stability at the core with excessive mobility at the shoulder, and they work very nicely together, for some pitchers anyway. And then the body, the core muscles provide a lot of the stability for the body, but the body has 3 other systems relies on to help achieve better stability. One of those systems is the framework. So if you look at the skeleton here, this is Fred, and so you have the framework consists of the bones, and then the ligaments that attach bone to bone, and then there's a three-dimensional web of connective tissue that is also not shown here, but it spans throughout the whole body, and it helps to create this somewhat rigid framework to give our bodies more stability. In addition to the framework, you have the neuromuscular system, which is composed of the brain, the spinal cord, which is all your nerves, and the muscles. And so you get signals from the brain through the spinal cord to the muscles, and then back from the muscles through the spinal cord to the brain. And these signals are messages, basically, that help the body know what to do at any given time and how to work. And then the third system that offers stability in addition to the core is the emotional state that you're in. And that has to do with the awareness that you have of how you're feeling, whether you're in pain, whether you're facing pain for a change, how you're holding your body, your postures, how you're moving your body, if there's some compensation pattern that you're using because of an injury or a weakness or an inflexibility. And also just your ability to focus, whether you come in a lethargic state or a super excited state. That could be excited happy or excited angry, but lethargic or excited plays on your ability to focus and to be aware of your body. So you've got the framework, the neuromuscular system, and your emotional state all helping the core muscles to provide even more stability to your body.
So when a body goes through injury, damage, pain, disease, those three things that we have talked about will often be interrupted. So what we're looking for each of you to achieve through this rehabilitation Pilates is success for where your body is at within its process of healing from pain, from inactivity, from disease, whatever it might be. And so how your individual success path travels is going to look very differently than the person next to you. So we're not looking for any type of norm. We're looking for what is successful in your body based on your pain patterns, based on your damage patterns. Studies have shown that one of the first things to turn off when you have back pain especially is the transverse abdominis, and that's the kind of foundation of the core. So we're looking to try to increase, again, the healthy patterns of the stabilization muscles that have been dampened because of pain. Often pain sort of redirects which muscles are helping to support you, especially if a certain muscle or a certain joint movement is causing pain. Well, we'll compensate by using something else that doesn't cause as much pain. And after a time, those patterns build and they leave us unable to heal and unable to stabilize and mobilize properly. So we'll be working on each person's individual ability to regain those proper functions.
So let's look at the 5 basic principles of Pilates. The first of those is breathing, and it's of utmost importance to life, and it's a very important principle within the Pilates world as well. So we're always looking at breathing three-dimensionally and making rhythmical breathing so that we're not holding our breath. The second principle is your pelvic placement. So again, using Fred here, this is your pelvis. So your pelvis can move in several different ways. The position of your pelvis in a neutral, and again, like Caitlin mentioned, neutral may be different for every person. It's your neutral, and it's based on how much your body moves in each direction, and that determines what your neutral is. So your pelvis has a neutral, and then the third principle is your rib cage placement. That might seem kind of funny to think of your rib cage placement, but your ribs actually can expand, and we call it popping up and out sometimes, and that's not the best neutral placement of your ribs. So we're looking at neutral placement of the rib cage. And then we talk about shoulder and scapular mobility, and the word scapula just refers to these wing bones back here. And so your scapula largely supports the movement and function of your shoulder, which there's a very wide array of movement patterns available. The shoulder is probably the most mobile joint in our body, but we have control of it partly by the position of our shoulder blades, these wing bones in the back. So that's the fourth principle of Pilates, is the scapular placement. And then the fifth and last principle is your head and neck placement. And you think of the weight of your head being 8 to 10 pounds, so the placement of that head makes a big difference in how supported your body is. So if you think of all of those, the pelvis, the rib cage, the shoulder blades, the head, as a stack of blocks, that stack of blocks is only as stable as the position of any one of those blocks. So if you've got the top block that's hanging out over the edge, like your head may be sometimes, in a stack of blocks, the whole tower would just fall down. Our bodies are a little bit better made than that, and because of that framework we talked about earlier, we have bones and muscles and ligaments holding bone to bone, and so we don't fall down and fall apart, but that excessive tilting of the head forward creates a whole lot more muscle tension for muscles that shouldn't have to be working, and it can cause tension and work for muscles even as far down as the feet, and so it's a lot of unnecessary work and tension in the body. So we're helping to create neutral in each of those positions to alleviate any undue stress and undue tension for the body so that it can work efficiently.
So we're going to give an overview of how to find the neutral position for each of those 5 core principal joints, including the breathing. And we most often start laying down on our back. So we're going to get set up here. So Dina's going to be my model on the trick over here. So we start laying on the back, so we can have gravity assist us and have something underneath your body to help start off with your muscles relaxed to be able to find each position that's optimal for your muscles to turn on. Each muscle in the body has an optimal length that it works from. If you imagine a muscle is all the way stretched out, and then you ask it to stretch more, what's going to happen? It could possibly tear or strain and cause you pain. Vice versa, if your muscles are really tight and clenched up all the time, then you ask it to take on a task that it's not ready for, it can't do anything else other than what it's already doing, and so it'll continue to cause you pain, stiffness, that type of thing. So we want to look for a position in a joint that's going to give the most ease of movement to the muscle, okay? So we'll be setting up all of those 5 places that Dina mentioned. So I like to start at the head, actually. So we're going to start with some exercise called head nods. And how this works is imagining, like Dina said, that your head is 8 to 10 pounds, and that this table underneath you, or a pillow underneath you, is a scale. So at all times, that scale is reading 8 to 10 pounds, whatever your head weight is. And what you don't want to be happening is lifting up or pushing back into the table. And so she's looking for the movement of the skull on top of the neck. Not moving the whole neck up and down, but really just bobbling that head as if you were a doggy on a dashboard. So she's going to gently move her chin and nose, actually mostly up towards the ceiling and then back down. Only trying to get as much motion in that neck and head as she can achieve without disrupting lower down in the neck and the shoulders, and keeping that head heavy on the table. Okay, so those are head nods. Next, we're going to look at the shoulders. The shoulders, as Dina mentioned, are the most flexible joint in the body, so we're going to look at 2 directions of neutrality here. She's going to start by shrugging the shoulders up towards her ears, and then slipping her shoulder blades down like she's putting them in her back pants pocket. So she's going to go up and down, and she's looking for that neutral. So when we went over the head position, she was going to find how far she can move and then rest in the middle place. So here again, she went up to her shoulders, to ears, down towards the hips, and then she rested when she felt she was in the middle of those 2 extremes. The next direction that we'll find for the shoulders is actually going to be up and down. So she's going to lift her arms up towards the ceiling and take the shoulder blades, raise them up off the table, and then lower them back into the table. So the shoulder blades are lifting and then supporting the arms. You can kind of imagine that we made a plus sign. So she made this horizontal section of the plus sign by shrugging the shoulders, and now she's lifting and lowering to make the vertical portion of the plus sign. So that's all the way down, that's all the way up, so she'll rest about halfway. From there, she can bend her elbows, lower the hands down onto the belly. She can either rest on the table or hands on the belly, whichever is more comfortable. This position actually gives you a little bit more of the neutral position that we're looking for. Often in physical therapy or in exercise, we're talking about down and back, and that stretches and contracts too many joints, too many muscles already to their end range. So it's not a very safe neutral to move from. So actually this forward and up position is a little bit more healthy and a little bit more neutral. Okay. So next we're going to look at her rib placement. So she's going to move her arms up over her head and see how that changes how her ribs are placed. And then by lowering down, you can see that the ribs have gone from that flared up position and lowered back down. Even without the arms, she can move the ribs around, and we want them to feel that they aren't popped away from the table and they aren't pressed into the table, that they're really in a middle position. Okay? And now she's going to breathe with the ribs. So we talk about belly breath a lot in exercise and yoga. We want the breath to come from the lower part of the rib cage and the upper belly. And she's going to imagine that she's breathing three-dimensionally, pressing the back of the ribs into the table as she breathes. Sometimes you can imagine that you were inside of something that you're trying to press on all sides at once, and that's how you're achieving your breath. It should be rhythmic in a nice even motion, in and out. And if you can go in through the nose and out through the mouth, that helps with your oxygen intake and helps to keep your muscles relaxed as you breathe. So the last place we're going to look at here is the pelvis placement. So she's going to take her pelvis and rock it up and down. So tucking the tailbone between the legs and then pulling the tailbone towards the table, which arches her back off of the table. So as she rocks up and down, she's looking for the two extremes, and then she's going to find her middle place between those two extremes. You can tell as she goes through those extremes, look at what it does to the rest of her ribs, her neck, her shoulders as she moves. So having any one of these joints or these core places in your body be out of position or be too far in extreme, it throws everything else off. So she's finding her neutral here. And then we're going to do some finding of that neutral in a little exercise. So she's going to tuck the tailbone here. And then imagine that the tailbone is going to peel up off of the table, picking her pelvis up one piece at a time as she sort of rolls the back up off of the table using the hips. And then she's going to lower her spine down one piece at a time and then return that tailbone to its neutral position. Okay, so that just rolls through that neutral position, and being able to come back and recover is a very healthy part of being able to stabilize and mobilize the body. So once she's found all of these neutral positions, we went through the head position, the two positions of the shoulders and the shoulder blades, her rib cage placement, her breathing, and her pelvic placement. Now we're actually going to turn on the core. So she's still in all of her neutral positions. She's going to take that nice deep breath in through her ribs and through her upper belly. As she exhales, she's going to pull the belly button down towards the spine, as if the belly button and the spine were connected by a rubber band. As she exhales, she just allows it to lower. I'm going to have her place her hands on her hip bones and then dig her fingers actually inside in the flesh, just inside her hip bones. As she exhales, breathing through the mouth, she should feel a slight tension underneath her fingers. It's not going to feel like she's getting a burn or like she's really tensing up, just a sort of flattening, lifting underneath her fingers, and that's that deep transverse abdominis. And that's telling her that her core, that flexible cage inside of her body is turning on. Okay. Feel it turning on? Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess we'll trade places now. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to look at the body in an upright position and looking at those same 5 principles of Pilates: the breathing, the pelvic placement, the rib cage placement, the shoulder blade placement and the head and neck placement, but now we're doing it with the effects of gravity and that we're having to counter. And this is how we move and live throughout our days with the effects of gravity. So our bodies have to be able to adjust and adapt to those effects and work within those boundaries. So I'm going to have Caitlin sitting here on the edge of the table, and we're going to go back to that first principle that I like to think of, just because, again, breathing is such an important thing for life, and I feel like it's very important with Pilates. The more you can get your breathing three-dimensional and rhythmic, the easier it's going to be for you to use the core muscles in a way that doesn't hold tension in any of them or have muscles working that you don't want to be working. So I'm going to have Caitlin put her hands along her lower rib cage here. And I'm just going to have you take a nice breath in, Caitlin, and you're, again, trying to breathe in three-dimensionally, like you put a balloon down your esophagus, and as you breathe in, you're inflating that balloon on all sides. And then as you breathe out with pursed lips, I want you to try to gently activate that transverse abdominis by drawing in low across the abdomen. Okay, so you're just getting a nice rhythmical three-dimensional breathing pattern going. And this will be very key to working with a lot of the Pilates exercises. It can be frustrating for people that don't tend to be breathing deeply throughout the day, and that is many of us. We all tend to, when we're stressed, hold tension in our bodies and become shallow breathers that breathe more through the chest than through that lower abdomen and rib cage. And so it becomes a little bit challenging sometimes for us to find where the lower ribs are and how to breathe into them. So Caitlin's doing a nice job there with that. So now we're going to move to that second principle, the pelvic placement. Okay, and just like in lying on your back, you tilt the pelvis forward and back to find that neutral position. You do the same thing in a sitting position. Only now you have an extra contact point. You have your sit bones, which are if you put your hands under your tush, and Caitlin, I'm going to have you actually put your hands under your tush. As you move forward and back with that pelvis, you'll feel that very bony part over the top of your hands. And so you're looking to find that middle zone of weight as it shifts from front to back. And that helps you identify where that neutral pelvis is. Okay, so once you've got the pelvis in line, that's key because if you look again at Fred here, in the position of the pelvis, now he doesn't have quite as much mobility in his pelvis as Caitlin does, but you can imagine that movement of the pelvis changes the position of the rest of the spine. So inherently, our bodies have natural curves to them. Our spine is not a rigid, straight structure. It has an inward curve at the low back here. It has an outward curve at the mid back. And it has an inward curve at the neck or the cervical spine. Those curves were put there for a very good reason. They serve as shock absorption for our body, especially when it's against gravity. So without the curves, if we had a rigid spine, our bodies would not be able to tolerate the forces of gravity throughout the day nearly as well as they can with the curves in the spine. So it's another reason, and these curves are what we call a neutral spine. So when we talk about neutral, we're talking about maintaining these curves. And Fred, you can go back over there. Okay, so we're going to go to the rib cage now. Now, I like to have you think about the pelvis being a pot and the rib cage being the lid to the pot. So if your pelvis is in neutral, then the pot, if it had water inside it, the water would be contained in the pot. It wouldn't be spilling out the front or spilling out the back. And then the rib cage is the lid of that pot. So if the rib cage is seated over the pot, then the lid will not open up and let steam from the boiling pot out. And when we talk about the ribs flaring up and out, it's kind of like the lid being tipped and letting steam out the front of the pot. So if that image helps you at all, it's just allowing the rib cage to sit in neutral over your pelvis. So just like Caitlin had you do lying down on your back, we're going to do that same arm movement sitting up here. And I'm going to have Caitlin bring her arms up all the way overhead. And you can look at what the ribs tend to want to do. They tend to pop up and out a little bit. And go ahead and bring your arms back down. So it isn't really necessary for the spine to have a lot of arching through here just because the arms are coming up overhead. But a lot of us tend to do that excessively instead of just having the movement of the arms. So this time, Caitlin, when you move your arms up, I'm going to have you breathe in as your arms come up to shoulder height, and then breathe out as you continue up. Good. And as you breathe out, you're activating that core. Now stop at the top and take a nice breath in, still expanding that rib cage, but not letting the ribs pop open. Good. One more breath in, and on your breath out, return your arms to your side. Very good. Okay. And let's do that one more time. So you're going to breathe in, hands go to shoulder height. Breathe out and continue those arms up overhead. Good. Take a nice breath in at the top, expand that rib cage. And as you breathe out, come on back down and engage that transverse abdominis. Very nice. Okay, so that's the rib cage placement that we were talking about. And then the scapular placement, just like when Caitlin had me on my back, she talked about making a plus sign with the 4 different movements that the shoulder blades create around the shoulder. So again, that's up towards the ears and down towards the hips. And Caitlin's going to just go a couple times in both directions as far as she can, and then she's going to find that center spot, halfway between there. Good. And then, Caitlin, I'm going to have you put your hands out in front, and you're going to reach forward and reach back. And if you can see a little bit, her shoulder blade is just wrapping around her rib cage here. And that's really all the movement that we're going for right now is that shoulder blade movement. You see how nothing else about her spine is changing. She's just got nice movement here. So now she's going to find the halfway point between all the way forward and all the way back. And then you can bring your arms back down. So now her scapula, her shoulder blades are in a nice neutral position, and she's right in the middle of that plus sign, up, down, forward, and back, right in the middle. Okay, and then last but not least is the head and neck placement. Now, ideally, in a non-computer, non-sitting, non-driving world, our head and neck, if everything else were stacked nicely like this, our head and neck would probably just follow suit and sit beautifully over those structures below it and in a nice vertical plane to them. However, because we are in a computer society, we do much more sitting than our ancestors ever did, and we tend to get drawn to things in front of us like a computer screen and the road. We often wind up like this, and our neck gets contorted and rounded and pulled forward. And so again, think about the weight of the head being 8 to 10 pounds. If you change the position of it, okay, something's got to hold that head up. Your body's saying, oh no, my head's falling off. I've got to do something. So all of these muscles start to turn on and work unnecessarily. And all you have to do is change that position to here. Now you've got gravity on your side because everything is just seated one thing on top of another. And nothing has to work nearly as hard through here just to hold you up. So the head and neck placement is very important as well to maintaining that neutral spine and allowing our bodies to work as smoothly and efficiently as they can. So now we're going to try one activity in this position. We call it a spine stretch forward. So I'm going to have Caitlin just briefly go through those 5 principles again. So she's going to start with her pelvic placement, find a neutral pelvis. And I encourage you to do this throughout the day as you go into a sitting position. You sit down to the dinner table, you sit down in your car, you sit down at work, and just visit each of these places. Rib cage placement, shoulder blades, find that middle of the plus sign, and then a nice easy head nod just to make sure that head is stacked over the top. Okay, good, Caitlin, that was great. And from this position, we're going to take a breath in, expand that rib cage, and as you breathe out, Caitlin, I want you to roll down starting from the head, and then you're moving the neck, the upper back, the middle back, and the lower back, as far as you can comfortably go down. Now, if you notice her lowest part of her spine, her sacrum, is still staying fairly vertical. And so she's seated over that pelvis still. Now take a nice breath in, expand that rib cage. And as you breathe out, I want you to restack your spine one section at a time. See how she's straightening that curve out one part at a time. The head and neck are the last thing to go. And we're going to do that one more time. Nice breath in. As you breathe out, you're going to round forward, starting with the head and neck. And notice that she gets the head moving to a certain point, and then the next part of her spine moves. She doesn't continue moving the chin all the way pressed into the chest. Nice breath in again. And then we're going to start down here and restack that spine. Lining up in a nice, tall, lengthened, neutral spine from head to tail. Okay, well, that I hope that you will continue to be useful as you join us in class whenever you start your rehab journey with us. And we hope that this will allow you to incorporate the goals that we have for Pilates, which again are body awareness, improving your strength and your coordination, all to help your body find pain-free, efficient movement.
So we'll go over all of these principles, all of the things we've talked about to some extent in class. It's a lot to process in your body and in your mind, so we'll repeat most of these things at every class. But this is a lot of information to take in, so try to just think about it, try it out in your body 1 or 2 times before you come into the class, so that when you get here, you're ready to really experience how Pilates rehabilitation exercise can work for you, and will help put it in your body so that you can find success. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you.